The President of the United States is unquestionably one of the most stressful, yet at the same time the most important role for anyone who has ever held the position. Of the 45 men to have served as America's Commander-in-Chief, a small handful could be considered the best. And that's exactly what we intend to talk about in this video. Just to be clear, this is not a list of our favorite presidents, but rather this is a video on the men whose accomplishments, vision for the country and overall impact in the United States can still be felt even today. Also, any presidents from the 2010s onward will not be included here. With that all cleared up, welcome to Lace 'em Up Media, and here are the 10 best presidents in U.S. history. Number 10. John F. Kennedy. Despite his presidency ending by way of assassination, JFK was able to accomplish much in his short time. From a domestic standpoint, Kennedy attempted to deal with the ever-growing issue of civil rights for African Americans, which led to the creation of what would be the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was later enacted by his successor Lyndon Johnson. Kennedy oversaw the creation of the Peace Corps and pushed for America's desire to head to the moon by the end of the decade. He also signed the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and tackled unemployment with various social programs referred to as the New Frontier. During America's Cold War with the Soviet Union, Kennedy was able to prevent nuclear destruction during the Cuban Missile Crisis before signing a treaty that banned nuclear testing between the U.S. and the Soviets. While it's interesting to speculate what JFK would have done had he lived and won the second term as president, the things he did do are still impressive. Number 9. Ronald Reagan. Starting off his career as an FDR-supporting Democrat, this former Hollywood actor began moving to the right and joined the Republican Party, due to his support of conservative figures like Calvin Coolidge and Barry Goldwater. After spending much of the 60s as governor of California, Ronald Reagan would run for president multiple times before winning it in 1980. Reagan dealt with low economic growth due to the stagflation that occurred under Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. By 1983, however, the economy begins to recover quite nicely, leading to a period of prosperity that hadn't been seen since the 1920s. Combined with his penchant for deregulation, cutting taxes and reducing the amount of nuclear weapons between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, led to Reagan not only winning the next election in a landslide but also would lead to the end of the Cold War. Reagan's time in office was transformative, as both of the Republicans and Democrats would continue if not adapt his ideology for military spending, limited government and a free market economy. Number 8. Harry S. Truman. Truman's journey from Missouri farm boy to the most powerful man in the world is something unlike any other. Upon being sworn in as the 33rd U.S. President on April 12, 1945, Truman had to continue where his predecessor left off, which was easier said than done. For starters, Truman had to finish the remainder of World War II as the Empire of Japan continued to fight despite their allies, Germany and Italy, surrendering a year earlier. This led to Truman making the epoch-shaping decision to use 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a way to bring an end to the war. After Japan officially surrendered on September 2, 1945, thereby signaling the end of the war, Truman would support the Marshall Plan, which provided aid to Japan and European nations affected by the war, in order to prevent another global conflict from cropping up in the future. In addition to this and his attempts at reducing communist influence around the globe, Truman had to deal with a post-war economy back at home. He also desegregated the U.S. military and pushed for more progressive policies with his Fair Deal legislation. Although his efforts didn't always lead to the results he would have hoped for, his time in office has been highly praised. Number 7. Dwight D. Eisenhower. A 5-star general during World War II, Dwight Eisenhower was one of the most popular men of his era, which explains why both of the major political parties wanted him as their candidate for president. Eisenhower would go on to become president as a Republican, and during his tenure he continued the same New Deal policies of his predecessors. The agency known as the Department of Health and Human Services was created, not to mention the interstate highway system, which helped to improve the country's infrastructure. Eisenhower also helped in leading the way for space research, which eventually led to the creation of NASA, and signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957. On foreign policy, Eisenhower was able to sign an agreement that pulled American forces out of the Korean War, and his handling of the Suez Crisis was impressive, with the president threatening the 3 countries invading Egypt with economic sanctions if they didn't cease hostilities. A great military leader, but an even greater commander-in-chief. Number 6. James K. Polk. When it comes to men who did a great deal in just one term as president, James Knox Polk not only set the standard, but perhaps did more than most presidents of his era. Upon entering the White House, Polk wasted no time in making his campaign promises come to fruition, as seen with the establishment of an independent treasury to maintain government money. On top of reducing tariff prices, Polk also negotiated a treaty with Great Britain in order to obtain the territories that would become the future state of Oregon, as well as other parts of land by way of the Mexican-American War. Not only would America emerge the victor when it was all said and done, but it also resulted in the U.S. acquiring the states of Texas, California, and future states like New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, making this one of the biggest examples of American expansion since the Louisiana Purchase. Number 5. Thomas Jefferson. Outside of George Washington, it could be argued that of all the founding fathers to become president, Jefferson's time in office still has the biggest impact on America today. In an attempt to spread his agrarian and limited government ideology, Jefferson would reduce the amount of government spending that occurred under his predecessors while also shrinking the size of the U.S. military. Adding to this, Jefferson would reduce the country's debt, continued international trading with other nations, and acquired new territories in what would be the aforementioned Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson's approach to government has been the key principles for both the Democrats and Republicans at different points in time. Also, his decision to step down after 2 terms, like George Washington, further cemented this as a precedent for all that came afterward. Number 4. Theodore Roosevelt. Following the assassination of President William McKinley in September of 1901, Vice President Theodore Roosevelt soon became the 26th U.S. president at the young age of 42. Unlike many Republicans who came before him, Roosevelt was a progressive who was not afraid to fight for reforms in order to improve the country. From regulating monopolies, supporting conservation efforts, the construction of the Panama Canal, ending the Russo-Japanese War, which made him the first president to win a Nobel Peace Prize, are just some of the things he did in his first term in office. After winning an official term in 1904, Roosevelt continued his progressive policies with the Hepburn Act of 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act, not to mention the Meat Inspection Act, with those last two preventing dangerous chemicals or misleading labels on food from being sold without proper examination. With accolades like that, it's no wonder he is on Mount Rushmore. Number 3. Abraham Lincoln. Without a doubt, Lincoln's leadership in the Civil War and his persistence in maintaining the Union during the whole ordeal is one of the most important achievements of any president in American history. That said, Lincoln's time as president doesn't just start and stop with the Civil War. Along with his leadership and skills as an orator, Lincoln would create the Department of Agriculture, sign the Homestead Act, which allowed new areas of land to be opened to those living in the western states, and he signed the Pacific Railway Acts, which opened the door to the first transcontinental railroad. Lincoln made sure that the country's money supply remained strong with the Legal Tender Act and the Revenue Act of 1862, as well as a National Banking Act in 1863. Combined with the states of West Virginia and Nevada being added to the Union, and the fact that Lincoln's 1.5 terms as president led to nearly 50-plus years of dominance for the Republican Party in the White House. Well, it's no wonder he is revered not just in the GOP but American history. Number 2. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Elected to the office a whopping 4 times between the 1930s and 1940s, FDR became one of the most popular and influential heads of state to ever enter the Oval Office. As the Great Depression continued to ravage the United States, Roosevelt's first order of business was to deal with the banking crisis, which he manages to do by using his fireside chats to communicate with the people and creating both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Roosevelt manages to honor a campaign promise by signing the Cullen-Harrison Act into law, which effectively brings prohibition to a much-needed end. He then spends his first 100 days passing a series of social and work programs that were designed to counterattack the worst aspects of the Depression. Many of these programs, which would make up FDR's first and second New Deal, helped many downtrodden Americans and introduced ideas like Social Security, an 8-hour workday, unemployment benefits, and a federal minimum wage, among other things. When World War II broke out all over Europe and Asia, FDR kept the U.S. out of the war, until the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor forced America's entry. Although he died a few months before the war ended, FDR's legacy was more than secured, through both his leadership and willingness to make the federal government intervene at a time of crisis. Before we get to number 1, here are a few honorable mentions. James Madison, created the Second National Bank of the U.S., became America's first wartime president in 1812, and ushered in the era of good feelings. Lyndon B. Johnson, signed both the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and his Great Society programs helped many poor and middle-class Americans. William McKinley oversaw a booming U.S. economy, increased America's military might, and achieved victory in the Spanish-American War. Bill Clinton signed the Family and Medical Leave Act, dealt with the threat of terrorism post-Cold War, and led the U.S. to job growth and economic success in the 90s. Ulysses S. Grant supported the 15th Amendment, signed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, took down the Ku Klux Klan, and made Yellowstone a national park. Number 1. George Washington. After winning independence from the British during the Revolutionary War, the newly created nation known as America needed someone to lead by example, and as such many chose George Washington. Despite his hesitation at becoming president, Washington was convinced that he would be a uniting force for the new country, and so therefore accepted the role. Of his many accomplishments, Washington attempted to stay above the fray when it came to foreign alliances or partisan politics, instead relying on members of his cabinet to help in making decisions. Under his watch, the Bill of Rights was ratified and he even led troops on horseback during the infamous Whiskey Rebellion, making him the only president to lead soldiers while still commander-in-chief. After serving 2 terms as president, Washington made the decision to limit his own power by stepping down, with this trend continuing on until FDR ran for a 3rd and 4th term in the 1940s. Respected, iconic, and an overall tremendous leader, there could be little doubt that George Washington is one of America's best presidents. And that's our list. Who do you think was the best U.S. president in American history? Leave your thoughts down below. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and hit the notifications bell so you never miss another one of our videos.